Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation, Enhancing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Programs Through Research, Innovation, Practice, Theory, and Measuring Outcomes. My name is Daryl Seib, and I'm the Director of Systemic Initiatives for the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission. Today's event partners, including MITACS, the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Manitoba, the Canadian Commission for the United Nations, Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission. Thank you for attending this presentation. For those of you who may not know, but as you will likely learn today, this event actually builds on the good work that was done earlier this year, and that resulted in a series of virtual symposiums to mark the halfway point for the International Decade for People of African Descent, as proclaimed by the UN General Assembly. As stated in the description of today's events in the brochure that you all received, that partners have organized a unique opportunity to connect municipalities in Western Canada through their leadership and equity officers, which I know are in the audience today, to a multidisciplinary team to address diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And I'm going to invite our first presenter to the virtual stage, Mr. Mohamed Musa. Just as a bit of a background, Mr. Musa is the Program Officer, Social Sciences, Humanities, and Youth for the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. Mr. Musa, please feel free to unmute your microphone and begin.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Daryl, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to Christine, to Ryan, to Daryl for including the Canadian Commission for UNESCO today and in this project. We're really happy to be here. Daryl mentioned, but my name is Mohamed Musa. I am the Program Officer for Social Sciences, Humanities, and Youth with the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. As part of my role with the CC UNESCO, which I'll discuss, I'll talk a little bit about our commission quite briefly, just to give you an idea of who we are and what it is that we do here in Canada and abroad. But I will mention right off the top that I am the coordinator for our network of inclusive municipalities. Some municipalities joining us today may be members of the coalition, which was formerly named something else, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And some may not be members, maybe thinking of joining. Certainly any of those questions, happy to answer as we go through the Q&A, but also absolutely more than happy to talk offline separately regarding that program in more detail should that interest you. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But with that, I will begin just with a little bit of background. So just to start off with a really basic and quick overview of UNESCO and what UNESCO is. UNESCO, as Daryl mentioned, is the acronym for the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It is one of the United Nations largest sub-bodies, representing 193 member states currently, along with 11 associate non-state members, of which Canada, of course, is a member state at UNESCO. UNESCO seeks to, as its main principal goal, seeks to build peace through international cooperation, through education, science, and culture in particular. And UNESCO's programs contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are set out in the 2030 Agenda adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 2015. And just to mention a little bit about, I'm going to flip to the next slide here. Our commission, our national commission. So UNESCO is actually fairly unique in the way that it operates through its member states. And I say that primarily referencing the creation of national commissions for member states. So as part of UNESCO's constitution, when it was created in 1957, UNESCO member states are actually required to create national commissions, and the point of national commissions really is to connect member states to UNESCO and connect UNESCO to member states, both civil society, government partners, and private sector. That's really the gist of what we do as a national commission. So we are actually based in Ottawa, on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory. But we work very closely with our permanent delegation to UNESCO, with Canada's permanent delegation to UNESCO that is based in Paris, France at UNESCO headquarters. As I mentioned, we really are, the aim of our national commission and of most national commissions is really to act as the link between UNESCO and Canadian civil society. And of course, in doing so, really try to bring Canadian perspectives to UNESCO and the UN level whenever that's appropriate. As a formal point, CC UNESCO, our National Commission actually operates under the umbrella of the Canada Council for the Arts. That was decided when it was established in 1957. The Canada Council for the Arts is a national crown corporation. And the reason that CC UNESCO is actually placed within the Canada Council for the Arts is, of course, there is quite a distinct link between the goals of UNESCO with regards to culture specifically and our arts community nationally in Canada. It does also ensure that our National Commission can actually operate at arm's length from the government without political interference or influence, at least to a very strong degree. So it does give us a bit more flexibility in how we're able to operate and communicate both with partners in government here, along with UNESCO and member states abroad. So without further ado, I'll get to the reason why we're obviously all gathered here today, specifically, which is to talk a little bit about our network, our coalition of inclusive municipalities. So this network, our coalition, actually brings together municipalities that want to improve their policies against racism, discrimination, exclusion, and intolerance. Its real strength lies in the shared experiences of its members. And together, municipalities undertake initiatives. We encourage municipalities, of course, to undertake initiatives to eliminate all forms of discrimination with a long-term view of building more open and inclusive societies. Just to talk a little bit about the specifics of the network in Canada. So I mentioned it did operate under a different name, actually, just until a couple of years ago. It was formerly known as the Canadian Coalition against Racism, of Municipalities Against Racism and Discrimination, or CCMARD. In 2017, the coalition underwent a sort of branding change to the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. That was for a couple of different reasons. The first of which is we are actually part of a larger international UNESCO network of inclusive and sustainable cities, the ICAR network, which is, as I mentioned, the International Network of Inclusive and Sustainable Cities. And so we wanted our coalition's name to align more accurately with that of UNESCO's, given that it is sort of the mother network, if you will, of our coalition. That international network includes coalitions from Africa, from Europe, from Asia, an Arab Cities Coalition as well, a coalition from Latin America and the Caribbean, and continues to grow. And so we are part of that large international network. The other reason that we embarked on that sort of branding change was that we wanted to broaden the scope of the coalition, not only to focus on issues around racism and discrimination, but to focus on inclusion in a more broad sense. And so expanding our base into conversations and discussions around reconciliation, conversations around inclusiveness of LGBTQ plus populations within Canada, and so forth. And so really the mandate is more broad. What the network looks like right now in Canada as we stand, we're actually almost at 100 cities, 100 municipalities that have formally joined the coalition, either the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities or the Canadian Coalition of Municipalities Against Racism and Discrimination, which actually was formally started in 2005. So the coalition has been around for quite a while, certainly much longer than I've been at the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. I mentioned the point is really to create a community of practice. So gather municipalities in order to help them improve their practices in promoting social inclusion, establishing and advocating for policies that eradicate all forms of racism and discrimination, and promote human rights and diversity. And the cities also undertake a commitment to follow through on a branch of 10 common commitments that is actually agreed upon by that international coalition that I mentioned, all which really speak to respecting and protecting human rights, diversity, and creating more inclusive societies. And I'll just mention really quickly in terms of the process for joining, because I know this is a common question we get from municipalities. It's a fairly simple process to join. That being said, it does require the undertaking of a couple of formal steps. So we do ask municipalities to pass resolutions through a resolution through council, formalizing their intent and membership as part of the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. This is really done to ensure a level of formalization and accountability for the municipality. So we don't want the coalition to sort of just be a brand that municipalities kind of attach to their cities. Rather, we want to ensure that municipalities are joining to really participate and co-create in that network and community of practice, and really begin thinking about the ways in which they can push for more open and inclusive policies within their locales. And then the next step is actually for the municipality to sign a declaration that's drafted by our National Commission that states their intent to become a member and create an action plan for their municipality on how they intend to achieve some of the broader goals. That action plan can look different depending on the size and scope of the city or municipality. We're obviously very flexible and understanding. We don't expect that all municipalities will have the resources of really large municipalities who are part of our coalition, say Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. We also very much welcome and encourage the participation of smaller and more rural municipalities as well, and understand some of the different challenges that those municipalities might face, and are working to adapt to that as well. And there is no financial cost associated with membership in the coalition, just to be clear. So with that, I will move to the next slide. And really, I just want to talk a little bit about why municipalities. So what is the intent of focusing on municipalities? Simply put, we really see municipalities as a key actor in creating inclusive spaces for citizens. Without the commitment and advocacy of municipalities, it becomes much more difficult to envisage meaningful changes in policy and discourse at other levels of government. Among other things, municipalities are also the main providers of essential services to citizens. This responsibility alone is incredible, and at times can be overwhelming, and it is all the more important to ensure that those services are provided in ways that are the most equitable and fair. And finally, municipalities also have the advantage, I would say the distinct advantage, and competence of being able to deliver quick and tangible results on the ground. So what citizens see and feel on the daily oftentimes are the result of services that are provided by municipalities, much more than say provincial or federal levels of government, which take more time to filter down to people and to communities. This may also in turn mean greater accountability for cities, but it also demonstrates, I think, the great potential that cities have in implementing inclusive policies for their communities. And just before I kind of begin to wrap up, I did want to share some examples of what we're trying to do as a National Commission, what we've tried to do over the past couple of years in terms of creating that community of practice. And so our National Commission for UNESCO does not proclaim nor intend to be prescriptive to our municipalities. What we want to be is really a convener, first and foremost, a network, a body that can bring municipalities together and share information and distribute that information in ways that makes the most sense. And also be of help to municipalities in the ways that they ask us. And so one of the things that we noticed and we heard a lot from cities in our network and outside of our network that was lacking were just resources at times. And so, guides about where to start in terms of key issues that are going on in the community. And so I just want to share a couple of examples of those. The first is this toolkit right here, and I will happily share the links to all of these in the chat after my presentation. All our resources, just for reference, are open access. So they are on our website. They are publicly available both to members of the coalition and to everyone. We don't seek to make them exclusive in any way. This toolkit specifically on welcoming immigrants and refugees to Canada and the role of municipalities in doing so was developed in collaboration with young people, with municipalities, community organizations, and experts in the field of immigration. It focuses specifically on how municipalities can best create welcoming environments for new immigrants and refugees. As I mentioned, in publishing the document, we consulted with immigration experts as well as members of our network to ensure that the recommendations presented throughout the toolkit would be useful and also easily applicable to municipalities. Creating toolkits, as I mentioned, for a network of this size with this much diversity, both demographic, size, linguistic, can be complicated at times. It is very hard to prescribe solutions. As I mentioned, it's not what we seek to do. Rather, the point of it is really to be able to provide best practices, to show folks, here's some examples of things that have worked and how they have worked and translated into real results, tangible results for community. And so it is our hope that, that was the outcome of this toolkit. One of the things that I like the most personally about this specific toolkit is that it uses examples from municipalities from across Canada. I believe we have some colleagues from Saskatoon, from the city of Saskatoon with us here this afternoon. Saskatoon is actually one of the case studies featured in this toolkit along with the city of Montreal and has some really interesting perspectives of what Saskatoon has done to create more welcoming spaces for new arrivals. And so I think it's a fascinating toolkit, but as I mentioned, I'll link to it after. And I'm just going to skip ahead to another one that we developed on LGBTQ2+ inclusiveness in 2019. Again, similarly, this was developed in collaboration with coalition member municipalities, as well as experts and members of the community themselves. Really provides examples of best practices for cities in relation to terminology, intersectionality, and again, specifically the role of cities and municipalities in ensuring that residents feel safe and included where possible. And so it's got some good resources as well. And finally, the last major section that I did want to mention here, I don't want to go without talking just a little bit about the importance and the work that we've done on the International Decade for People of African Descent, as well as the work that we seek to continue doing in this regard. The International Decade was born out of deep concern around racism and discrimination against African descendants, and its major themes are recognition, justice, and development. This was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in 2015. As I'm sure some of you may be aware, Canada recognized the International Decade for People of African Descent in the year 2018. And Nova Scotia actually became the first legal jurisdiction in the world separate from a member state to implement an action plan and officially recognize the International Decade, which is quite cool. And we've had a good opportunity to work with the province of Nova Scotia on the decade in this regard. The last slide that I'm going to share references a publication that we co-developed with the Association for Canadian Studies a couple of years ago on the International Decade. Is a two-part publication. It is also open access, and I can share that. But I think just to conclude briefly here, one of the things that we've noticed as a National Commission, particularly and as a coalition, and what we're really starting to think long and hard about is our commitment to anti-Black racism, to addressing anti-Black racism as a coalition. And so whether that looks like developing some toolkits in that regard, or having more open source and open forum conversations with communities and municipalities around this. Certainly the past 6 to 7 months, we've had a very high spike in interest in members joining the coalition. And we can't separate that from the events of the last couple of years, the very public and tragic murder of George Floyd, as well as high-profile incidences of anti-Black racism here at home in Canada. And so this has certainly become a priority issue, I would say, for the coalition, and long past due in saying that. But in terms of our National Commission, we really also try to fit this all within the context of the International Decade for People of African Descent, and really try to amplify and celebrate the messages of that decade and try to amplify the goals of the decade, which is quickly coming to a close in 2024. That being said, a permanent forum for people of African descent has actually just been created and adopted at the United Nations. So we'll certainly be working with them going forward. But I did want to just mention that as kind of some priority issues. I do hope this has been helpful. I know I've thrown a lot of information at folks and different resources, and I totally appreciate that. But like I said, I'm happy to answer questions both in the Q&A session and beyond. Please feel free to reach out and connect with me, and be happy to chat about how we can get more municipalities involved with the coalition. Just right before I wrap up, I just wanted to say one final thing, which is that our coalition has been undergoing some sort of transformative changes, I think, to the way we govern ourselves and we bring together our community of practice. Early next year, we plan to roll out a new reporting framework for municipalities to be able to gather accurate information from our member municipalities and report back both to our executive committee and to other members about what's happening around the country, sort of like an environmental scan in terms of anti-racism, equity, and inclusion policies. And in doing so, we are going to be setting up some regional calls, both for signatory members and interested members in joining the coalition. So we plan to go region by region. We launched a pilot call in Alberta a few months back, and it was quite successful. We had several equity officers from different municipalities, and we hope to do the same in Ontario and Quebec and in the prairie provinces up north on the East Coast, etc. So I will stop there because I know there's a lot more to get through. Thank you so much for listening, and hope to chat with all of you soon.